What is up and what is going on, everybody? Welcome aboard the Fantasy Fast Track. Today we are talking about wide receivers and my top 12 rankings for wide receivers. So let's get into it. I'm trying to do this all in one cut today, so if I stumble a little bit, that's why. Starting out with my wide receiver one is Cooper Kupp. Now, that may be kind of hard to believe. Most projections have Justin Jefferson as the wide receiver number one, but when I look back at the stats and just at the way that I felt when I had Cooper Kupp on my team last year, I think he deserves to be the number one. Basically, in the time that he was playing in those 9 games, he was outscoring even Justin Jefferson by a large margin. If you were to calculate his stats, he had about 164 total fantasy points, and Justin Jefferson had around 140 fantasy points from in those 9 games that they played together. They both had a week 7 bye, so you could compare it pretty good to each other. And I just think Cooper Kupp has more value. He's used a little bit more as a rusher, and he is going to get a tremendous amount of targets that will help him usurp someone like Justin Jefferson. And really looking at my projections that I have right now, he projects to have 146 targets, or I mean 146 receptions on 195 targets. That is percentage wise is about 75% of his targets because he has a very low yards per target, yards per reception, and he's going to catch a lot more of those passes because they use him over the middle of the field. They're drag routes. They're not super crazy routes. He's not super far down the field. Kind of self-explanatory. He does have projected 11 touchdowns, which is about the pace that he had last season. Now, he does have a little bit more of a rushing upside as well. They used him a little bit last season in the 9 games that he had. He ended up having, I believe it was 2 touchdowns. With my projections I have right now, I don't have rushing factored in. So it may be a little different for most players. But as far as wide receivers go, usually they're mostly sticking to receptions and receiving yards. Uh, Unless it's really somebody like Deebo Samuel. Jamar Chase might have a little bit more rushing upside, but most likely these wide receivers are being used as strictly a wide receiver. So I can kind of keep those stats there, and it's not too crazy. So my wide receiver one, as I've stated, is Cooper Kupp. I think there is a tremendous amount of reliability there. Really, the only reason that he should falter in any way is injury. If Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford stay healthy all season, there really is no reason that he cannot finish as the wide receiver one. If you were to look at his fantasy points per game, he averaged an 18.2 fantasy points per game, whereas Justin Jefferson, even though he was an elite and finished as the number one wide receiver that year, this last year, he was at a 17.9 fantasy points per game, and this is all with a half PPR ranking. So to move on to number two, that is, you guessed it, is Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is an elite talent playing for the Vikings, and there really is no reason that he shouldn't get his 180 plus targets this season. He he is unstoppable. As you've seen him play, he just does really well. He does have a fairly deep yards per target, which brings down his reception percentage just a little bit, but it's really not that bad. And being in such a high powered offense and a defense that is questionable for the Vikings, he will be getting passed to a lot. Kirk Cousins loves him, so there really is no reason not to draft him. And one of my favorite things about Cooper Kupp, just kind of going back to him, is you can pick him up and pick 6 or 7, but Justin Jefferson is still going number one overall. Which, in all reality, may end up being a safer bet because Justin Jefferson has not struggled with injuries at all, and he's only coming in his year 24 season, I believe. Maybe he's 23. I'd have to look at the age, but he's still really young, and he hasn't had any injuries. So the chances of him being healthy for the whole entire season is a lot more likely as to compared to Cooper Kupp. So just a little bit of the stats that I have. He Justin Jefferson should average around 180 targets, which puts him at 120 yards or 120 receptions, uh, 1,600 yards, and about 11 touchdowns. So that's kind of similar to the pace that Cooper Kupp had as far as touchdowns. Now, Justin Jefferson this last season did have 14 touchdowns, but I'm kind of banking on the fact that with Jordan Addison and T.J. Hawkinson there, the chances are that they're gonna have a little bit more touchdown going to different people. But Justin Jefferson is a magnet in the red zone, so there is definitely upside for him to have more than 11 touchdowns this upcoming season. With number 3, I have Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, really, there's no stopping Tyreek Hill. He is the cheetah. He is fast. He gets open, and he really is super reliable. Even last year when Jalen Waddle struggled a little bit with the backup quarterbacks and everything, Tyreek Hill was able to push through, and he still received a tremendous amount of targets and was able to produce almost every week. He did have a few busts, but that happens with wide receivers. So if we can get Tua to stay healthy and Tyreek to stay healthy, there's no reason that he cannot finish as the wide receiver 3, or he definitely has the upside to finish as the wide receiver 1, and I'm sure that is why he's being drafted in the first round. Just a little bit of stats with him as well. He I have him projected for 160 targets, which he probably can get more than that. This last year, he had more than 160 targets, but I think this year the way that everything's going to go, they're going to get a little bit more rush heavy. They've kind of I wouldn't say lengthened. They've increased their depth at the running back position this year for the Dolphins, and I believe they're going to rush a little bit more just to keep Tua from dropping back and getting injured, because all of his concussions came from him being in the pocket and came off of a sack. So if they can calm that down just a little bit, it obviously won't really hurt Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is such a good athlete and a good wide receiver that he can make do with those receptions and those target totals. I do have him statted out for 10 touchdowns. That was about what he had last year, and I don't think there's really any concern here with Tyreek Hill, and with Jalen Waddle being there, I don't think they're going to really eat into each other's value as a wide receiver. But there is the thing that you have to watch out for is Tua. Tua could really last the whole entire season, not have a concussion, or you're into the concussion issues week 3, and then it's just backups from then on out. So that's definitely something to keep the eye on. If for some crazy reason something comes up in training camp and you haven't done your drafts yet, but that's just something to watch for. Really, Tyreek, there isn't as much risk as some of the later wide receivers, and he's probably on the risk scale. It's the same as Cooper Kupp. He's getting a little bit older. He hasn't struggled with as much injury as Cooper Kupp, but there is definitely wide receiver 1 upside for sure with Tyreek Hill. Coming in number 4 is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now that may come to a surprise for most people. It may be a little bit of a hype thing that I'm seeing, but with Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's the type of receiver that holds grudges. You can tell by the way he lists out all the wide receivers that were drafted before him. And I just think there is so much potential for him to just continue to rack up targets like crazy, because with what is that guy's name? I keep always accidentally calling him Jamal Williams. Jameson Williams, with him being out for the first 6 weeks, um, he's going to collect plenty of targets. They don't even have a they have a rookie tight end coming in, and so even though T.J. Hawkinson really wasn't getting that many targets last year, that it's just he just has a tremendous amount of opportunity for targets, and he's going to score a plenty of fantasy points because of those targets. I have him statted for 155 targets, which equals to about 108 receptions, and with uh with 9 touchdowns. He did struggle to find the end zone last year, but I think that's something that he can definitely improve on, and I think he will improve on that. He he shows just an ability to become a better wide receiver each year, and he had a fair amount of end zone targets. And I'm also thinking, because Jamal Williams, after he left the Lions, there is a large amount of touchdowns that can go to other players. Jamal Williams had 14 touchdowns this last year inside the 10-yard line. So if just a few of those can go to Amon-Ra St. Brown, then he's definitely going to make a step up and end up as a top tier wide receiver. Now, getting on to wide receiver number 5, which a lot of people have ranked as the wide receiver number 2. That is Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase has explosive potential, and he could finish as the wide receiver number 1. And he's got an excellent quarterback with Joe Burrow. So really, risk versus reward, there really is plenty of reward and not that much risk. You may even have more risk as far as the quarterback goes with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think that the targets and the ability just to get the ball with Amon-Ra St. Brown will outweigh Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase does tend to have just a little bit higher average depth of target, which lowers his reception percentage just a little bit. But with Joe Burrow, he's going to be slinging the rock, and it's going to be in the right spot. And with Ja'Marr Chase, you could pick him up in the first round wherever you want. If you wanted to go number 1 at all, I wouldn't disagree with that. But I just think that the first 4 wide receivers I was talking about have a lot more opportunity to get a tremendous amount of targets, whereas with Ja'Marr Chase, his targets are going to dip down just a little bit, just because T. Higgins needs to feed into there, and it just that's just kind of how I have it statted out. I really have no excuse not to have him higher. It's just where I favor Ja'Marr Chase at is at the wide receiver number 5, and he does have 13 touchdowns, which is about what he had this last year. So I kind of kept that the same. I think he does have a tremendous touchdown opportunity, but I do not have my rushing aspects in, and I do think Ja'Marr Chase will be used a little bit more as a rusher as well. So that may bump him up over Amon-Ra, where Amon-Ra really doesn't get used as a rusher. He just is there to catch all the passes that Jared Goff wants to throw in the short area. Wide receiver number 7 is Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs has had a little bit of drama this last postseason, and seems to be fighting with Josh Allen and everybody else, just saying he needs to be involved more, which is kind of funny considering he's had some of the largest target counts in recent history. But I don't see that improving a whole lot because the issue with the Bills is they're trying somehow to find a rushing aspect to their team. So if they just pass even more, I mean, we would love that for fantasy. When it comes to winning football games, you do need to have a little bit of rushing aspect there. I know that they're kind of throwing in their chips with James Cook this year, and who knows, they may have the Cook brothers there somehow sign Dalvin Cook, but I don't think their salary cap can handle that. I haven't looked too much into it because I know that the Bills haven't even really been biting on it. So we will see there. With Stefon Diggs, I have him statted out for 165 targets. Now that could go different ways, and a lot of the issue is last year with Josh Allen and his injury, that kind of bumped Stefon Diggs down just a little bit. But he could finish as the wide receiver one as well. That these top 10 to 12 wide receivers have a lot of upside, but with Josh Allen and the way he plays, there is a good possibility that he will sit out a game or two, not of his own choice, but just because with the way he plays ruthless, and there is a good possibility that he could get injured again. That really is the only downside to Stefon Diggs. He is getting a little bit older, and so he is reaching that cliff where wide receivers tend to drop off, but that's kind of how most of these wide receivers are in the top 10. There is that age risk with everything. So let's move on to wide receiver number 8, which he is becoming one of my favorite wide receivers to pick up in drafts, and that is Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is attached to Justin Herbert, and with this year going on and Kellen Moore showing up as the offensive coordinator, I think there is a tremendous amount of value coming to Keenan Allen because they probably won't pass that much more, but I think that the quality of the offense and the quality of the targets, if you can even say that, is going to get a lot better. And Keenan Allen, who is the last draft I did, I was able to get him in round 4, which may not be accurate depending on which leagues you're going in. Mine was just a PPR mock draft over on the NFL.com. But if you can pick him up, and he has the upside of a wide receiver 1, even in it coming in as a wide receiver 8, he's going to PPR himself. He's going to PPR all the way up to wide receiver 8. He doesn't end up in the end zone a lot. I have him statted for 7 touchdowns, which is about the rate that he's normally done for his career. And he, like a couple of those wide receivers I've mentioned earlier, he is hitting that age, though, where he may fall off and it may turn into a Quentin Johnston type of season. But if Keenan Allen can stay healthy and the offense clicks, Keenan Allen's going to have a tremendous amount of upside. He's going to get a lot of targets, a lot of receptions, a lot of yards, and which turns into a lot of fantasy points. Let's go to wide receiver number. Wait, did I just say with Allen number 7 or 8? Yeah. Anyways, wide receiver number 8, AJ Brown. AJ Brown has obviously a tremendous amount of potential. The only struggle with AJ Brown that I've had is the fact that the Eagles are such a rush heavy team, and they have Devontae Smith digging into the pie. So there is potential for them to have 2 top 10 wide receivers, but I just feel like the targets are kind of slowed down a little bit because of the way that the Eagles like to play. And with the Eagles, though, I'm really not that concerned. There's a tremendous amount of touchdowns available, especially if they decide to even those out just a little bit. I believe the Eagles last year had like 42 rushing touchdowns, or maybe it was 32. I don't know. But it was a tremendous amount of rushing touchdowns. And if those turn just a little bit back the other way as far as receiving touchdowns, then A.J. Brown is probably going to pass his 11 touchdown mark I have him set for, which would definitely, obviously, push him up as a wide receiver. The the two main issues I see with Devontae with AJ Brown is Devontae Smith and is the fact that he won't be getting a tremendous amount of targets. I have him statted out for 145 targets, which would in turn into 91 receptions because he has an outrageous yards per reception or yards per target. Anyways, he because his 16.5 is actually what I have him set it out for. He had a 17.2 this last season, so he he was doing he was way out there anyways. But AJ Brown has a tremendous amount of potential. I like him. He is being drafted in the I believe in the second round, third round. I don't know. I'd have to check, but he can be a very good wide receiver for your team, and definitely should be picked up as a wide receiver one. Uh, Next on my list is somebody I've kind of been, I guess, talking down just a little bit, and I statted him out, and then he finished up as the wide receiver 9 on my list, and he I'm just really timid when it comes to going after Devonte Adams because the Raiders are such a volatile team. With Josh Jacobs sitting out and Devonte Adams is probably going to get just tired of everything, but he is such a good wide receiver, and it doesn't seem to be that he's hitting that drop off that players do when they're around 30, 31 years old as a wide receiver. I did, as I was statting him out, I did kind of tone his targets down just a little bit, just because with Jimmy Garoppolo being there and his lack of an ability to stay healthy, I'm really concerned that he will probably be getting targets from a backup at some point in his Raiders career this season. He had 180 targets this last year, and he only caught 100 of them. But that was just because of his tremendously huge yards per reception. His was like his was the second highest compared to as far as it goes. The only person that was higher than him was AJ Brown. So all of his targets were downfield targets. He wasn't catching a lot of them, and you could blame a lot of that on Derek Carr, but I really don't think so because Derek Carr usually has been a fair down the field passer. He ended up only catching like what was it, 56%? I think that's what the percentage is. Yeah, his catch rate was not very good, and if those if his yards per target remains the same, then he's probably because Jimmy Garoppolo is I think a worse deep ball thrower than Derek Carr is. So, and if he's just working on one foot because he still hasn't 100% got back from his ankle injury, then there's definitely a lot of struggles that could happen with Devontae Adams. He for his whole career he's had a pretty dang good quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, and then a pretty good one in Derek Carr. And my concern is the quarterback play could drop off, the rushing game could drop off, and then they're just stuck with this terrible, terrible offense that can't really get down the field. And which, if you can't get down the field, you're probably not going to get a lot of touchdowns. Now, I have him statted out for 10 touchdowns. He had 14 this last year, which was his highest he's ever had in his career. So he did have a very good season last year. But I just don't see the Raiders offense working down the field. Now this is all playing off of Josh Jacobs not being there. If Josh Jacobs is there, there is a little bit of a push up for the Raiders offense, and their defense is still just middle of the pack. It may be even worse this year, but we'll see. I don't, the Raiders are always just a team that I just can't really trust. I really was excited for this last year when they were going to have Darren Waller healthy and all that stuff, but that never really happened. Next on the list, you would think I was a Chargers fan by the way some of my rankings are going, but is Mike Williams. Mike Williams, he's another wide receiver that when he plays, he is an elite wide receiver. The issue is he only plays 3 games a year. So with Mike Williams, I have him statted out for 125 targets, which the way he plays, a lot of it is a deep balls and stuff like that, and so he's got a higher yards per target, and which gives him obviously the lower reception percentage. But if you are to stat all that out, he does in my projections come in as the wide receiver 10, and there is tons and tons of upside with the Chargers this season. I really think they're going to step up. And, this may, based off my rankings, I almost should just be waiting and picking up Quentin Johnston because chances are, and from the way it sounds like in camp, he's going to be involved with this offense. And if Mike Williams only plays 3 games, somebody's got to pick up the slack, and that'll probably be Quentin Johnston. There really is the biggest knock on Quentin Johnston. I mean, the biggest knock on Mike Williams is his health. He just hasn't been able to be healthy, and which unfortunately is a big, a big deal as a player in the NFL. If he could stay healthy, he's always shown that he can be an effective wide receiver. There is a little bit of a topsy-turvy situation where he'll show up one week, he'll score you 25 points, the next week he's scoring you 2 fantasy points, or he just gives you a whopping 0 because somehow he misses all 7 of his targets. I don't know. But there is a great amount of potential with Mike Williams, and I think that with Kellen Moore being there with the Chargers, I really believe it's going to completely magnify the Chargers offense. And the Chargers defense just doesn't seem to be clicking right. And I mean, they may be a little bit better this year as they kind of reinvent the wheel on defense. And I mean, last year they had a couple of cornerbacks that didn't play out. They were injured, and then so there was a lot of offense that was needed to be played. And like Justin Herbert, he had almost 700 pass attempts this last year. So if he can pull that in just a little bit, then or maybe it was almost 600. Probably wasn't 700. Anyway, if he can pull that in just a little, if he can pull that in just a little bit with accuracy, then these wide receivers on the Chargers team have a great opportunity to finish in the top 10. And Justin Herbert definitely can produce 2 top 10 wide receivers, especially if he's throwing for 5,000 plus yards. There's plenty of yards to go around. Obviously, Austin Eckler will get his, and who knows, we may have another wide receiver like Quentin Johnston that ends up being a top 36 wide receiver just off the fact that there is going to be a large amount of targets and a large amount of yardage going around with Justin Herbert. My number 11 wide receiver that I've also been very hesitant to rank this high, but the talent and the potential is there, and that is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson finally, we think, has a really good quarterback. Aaron Rodgers has showed up there, and he's been playing the part, and I've just been so concerned about the fact that Aaron Rodgers last year had a worse fantasy football season than Russell Wilson this last year. And we've all been knocking on Russell Wilson, but Can Aaron Rodgers do it? Aaron Rodgers didn't score a single game over 20 fantasy points this last season. So it definitely makes me question how the Jets are going to function. Granted, I wouldn't say that his wide receiver. Of course, the funny thing about knocking the wide receiver core for the Jets is the wide receiver core, other than Garrett Wilson, is the exact same that Aaron Rodgers had with the Packers this last year. He has Randall Cobb, he has Allen Lazard, and then now he'll have Garrett Wilson. Which Garrett Wilson definitely, I think, is a better pure wide receiver than Christian Watson. So I really think that there's a great amount of potential here. But my struggle is Aaron Rodgers, is he still a really good quarterback, or what? Or did we just witness the top of the hill where he's going to start falling off in this next year and do kind of be the this year's Russell Wilson? So I've been really hesitant with Garrett Wilson. He is a great talent and definitely tons of upside. If Aaron Rodgers clicks and he is as good as he should be, and Garrett Wilson's talent continues to develop and become better, you're looking at easily a top 3 wide receiver, and there is plenty of potential there. But I just am real hesitant to cast my vote for Garrett Wilson being real, because it's somewhat. I've seen a lot of people have Garrett Wilson ranked inside the top 10, which is fine. It's just a few spots higher. But I just have a hard time trusting Aaron Rodgers and the Jets as a whole, because there really won't be a need to be passing a ton for the offense if they can just control the ball. That was the issue last year, is they just couldn't get down the field. They had an excellent defense, but they couldn't get down the field. So if I fear that Aaron Rodgers is just going to turn into a clock manager like he kind of always did before, slow the pace of game down, and then go score when needed. But the defense is what's going to win the football game. And let's see here. Coming in at number 12 is Chris Olave. Chris Olave has, I think, an upgrade at quarterback with Derek Carr coming in, and I think there's a great potential for him to just really just tear the league up. He had 15 touchdowns last year, so I knocked that down just a little bit with the 14 touchdowns. But if he can have 130 targets, which I think is kind of small for him, but the issue is Michael Thomas will also be there, and if he's anything like he was, or if he's 80% of the Michael Thomas that we used to have a few years ago, then he will definitely draw enough targets to where Chris Olave won't be the complete target hog for the team. But they will need to be passing. The Saints defense isn't the Saints defense of old. It's still, middle of the pack, but they're definitely going to be in some games where they're going to have to throw the ball, and Chris Olave has been proving himself, especially this last year, that he has what it takes, and he can be a very good wide receiver. So with 85 receptions, that isn't a large amount of receptions, but it should be enough to get it done. And with a 14 yards per reception, it's high, but it's not really that high. That's about in the middle where you kind of want it to be. And I think there's just a tremendous amount of potential for Chris Olave. And my only downer is, it's just with these quarterbacks that are moving to different teams to more or less to finish their career, the percentage of those actually being any good has not been in the favor of the fantasy player. So if Derek Carr can't click Of course, they have been having John Gruden show up to Saints practices so that he can help install the offense, I guess, or I don't know. So hopefully that's working for him. But there's great amount of potential for Chris Olave, and that kind of wraps up my top 12. I'll be hitting you with 13 through 24 shortly here. Let me know what you think of my rankings in the comments below, and if you were provided any value of this and you would like to see more videos just like this, please subscribe and be ready for 13 through 24 here shortly. Take care.